to discuss in order to the inclusion of gender in all this climate work that they're doing in the region. In order to do so, we would like to introduce you first with Vincent Sweetie. He's the head of the Caribbean Subregional Office of the United Nations Environment Program, to do some opening remarks. Please, Vincent, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Daniel, and good morning or good afternoon to everyone that's joining us. It's a pleasure to be here, and very happy to be the first to speak, so that nobody will repeat what a few remarks I have to say. For this webinar, I think we are going to be blessed with a very interesting perspective. Women play a vital role in the transformation of society, and their role in climate action is critical, not only in the Caribbean, but moreover around the world. And we probably don't even need to say this. But following on the heels of a week of activities marking International Women's Day, which was extremely busy here in Jamaica, I have to say, it's great to be able to participate in this event, and I congratulate the organizers. This event, as most of you will know, brings together NGOs, regional organizations, the UN family, and other international development partners to highlight our work and the challenges we must collectively address. I look forward to hearing the positive examples of daily commitments of women to the environment, and more specifically to tackling waste and fighting climate change in the Caribbean, as well as how your work is supporting the circular economy and the global goals such as the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement, all very important to our common agenda in the Caribbean. As you may know, the main objective of the webinar is to support the acceleration of equality and empowerment, and to show how women's leadership and collective action can make a difference for their related communities and the environment in the Caribbean, in order to inspire not only activists and young women, but moreover civil society, institutions, organizations, and the general public towards a new awareness of waste management and climate change. I therefore am pleased to keep my remarks very brief and to hear from my other colleagues and from our featured speakers. So over to you, Daniel, for wishing you all a successful event. Back to you.
Vincent, thank you very much. Now we would like to introduce Christopher Corby. He's the Senior Coordination Officer of UNEP in the Caribbean Environment Program. Chris, thank you very much, and please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Daniel, and joining my colleague Vincent in extending a very warm welcome to all of you who have joined us, wherever you are in the world. So again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. And in the trends set by Vincent, I just want to continue on the theme of partnerships. And first of all, it's really a pleasure for the United Nations Environment Program to be part of this event, both through the sub-regional office, but also through the Regional Seas Program, the Cartagena Convention Secretariat, which we represent. And we are really pleased also with the speakers that we have highlighted here, who are going to share their perspectives on the significant role that women play in the development agenda. We've seen, whether it be from the highest political level, as we've seen by our ministers who are women, as well as the heads of government from the Caribbean who are women, to the scientists that are involved in various aspects of environmental monitoring and waste management, to our communities, to our fisher folk, to our fisher women who are often at the head of food security issues, whether it be in farming or fishing. And also the fact that many of the environmental challenges that our region faces have a disproportionate negative impact on women. As UNEP and as the Regional Seas Program for the Caribbean, we continue to realize that this is not work that we can do alone. And we certainly do welcome the support of the UN partners, of civil society, and in sharing your perspectives, sharing your experiences, but I think more specifically also challenging all of us as a people in terms of how we can make all of our interventions more gender sensitive, more equitable, and to ensure that we are moving towards the achievement of all of the sustainable development goals in a more integrated fashion. So like my colleagues, I think we are here just to help set the stage. I also very much look forward to the featured speakers that we have. And thank you everyone for joining. And back over to you, Daniel.
Christopher, thank you very much. So now I'm going to explain to you what we're going to do next. We're going to have an open conversation with different specialists and experts towards like all these gender topics in the different projects that we're working on. And we're going to like to start with Nadia Manning Thomas. She's the planning and coordination specialist for the UN Women Multi-Country Office. Nadia, hello, nice to meet you. And also I would like to open to you. Maybe you can tell us what is your office doing and what is the relation between, gender and, in the waste sector and the circular economy, and how you are strengthening the participation of women in all the projects that you're implementing in the region.
Good morning, Danielle, and to everyone else on the panel and those who are hopefully watching this webinar. It's a very important topic to us in UN Women, of course, and hopefully an important topic to others, and really a good idea to be bringing this into such a public forum to be able to inspire others to join forces with us, because as Vincent said, it's great to have partnership in this area. So as you said, Danielle, I'm from UN Women. So we are primarily looking at gender equality and the empowerment of women, but we do that in a number of different spaces and through a number of different thematic areas. And one of those areas is on climate change and the related disaster risk reduction and resilience of our communities. And so thinking about gender responsiveness is a key part of our work in that area. And it's a key part of our work in the Caribbean. The Caribbean, as a geographical area, as the region, has high vulnerability to climate change and to disasters. And so it is an important area for us to be thinking about climate change in itself and disaster, but also how do we respond to that in a way that leaves no one behind. So for the Caribbean, the MCO, the Multi-Country Office of the Caribbean, gender responsiveness in the climate change arena is an important area. The way that we approach it is we look at it from two main lenses. One is that women, as I think was highlighted earlier by Chris and probably also by Vincent in their opening remarks, women and girls are more adversely affected by the effects of climate change, and particularly the fast onset of disasters, disproportionately to others in the populace. We find that there are effects on women and girls that we don't see in the rest of the population, and more difficulty in longer term to recover and have the kind of resilience to the effects of climate change and disasters. So from that respect, it's something that we really need to work on. On the other side, women are important agents, change agents, important voices, important actors in this space. And I think we'll see this in this great panel that has been pulled together, a number of women who are strong actors in this space, but there are many others across the Caribbean. And so making sure that there is space, there's a seat at the table for women actors, whether it be all the way at the top of our government or amongst our general population, to have that voice be heard and to have their actions play an important role in climate change. So in addition to thinking about it in terms of the vulnerability and being an important actor, we also approach it from two general areas. So we think very importantly about the enabling environment. So we think about the strategies and policies, the frameworks, the strategic plans, all of those things that set the stage for how actions will take place. So we look at that and we consider that in terms of our normative framework, and really to think about how much those reflect a good gender responsiveness and can bring in elements and components that will be protective for across all genders, but making sure that women and girls are also getting protection through that as well. And then we think very carefully around the actual operational activities, and really seeing how those activities are inclusive, and how we can implement activities that really promote gender responsiveness. So we have those sort of two levels, the enabling environment and then the operational activities, to make sure that both are gender responsive. We have a lot of different programs that we are partnering together with other UN agencies, with CSOs, with the government, with the wider development community on this. And I won't go into the details of all of those, but definitely some exciting spaces where we're looking at training. So training first responders, training in Parliament, training in CSOs around gender responsiveness for the various activities that they'll be doing. We look at data. Data is an important element. The need for sex disaggregated data has become very clear, so that we have a good evidence base for which to bring arguments, to make positions, to have decisions made. So we're really looking at sex disaggregated data as an important component. Thinking about things like assessments, so longer term assessments for the cost of inaction in Caribbean islands around the climate change agenda, including women. We also look at rapid assessments when it comes to the sort of faster onset disasters that may be part of the wider climate change impact. And we look at the different ways in which we can enable greater resilience of women and communities in general across both genders. Just to give going sort of deeper into our layers, one last example is that when we think about the involvement of women as important actors, as Vincent sort of set the stage for us to do in this, and this hopefully will inspire people, is that we have developed a model around resilient, inclusive, smart, and secure cities as a way to think about particularly our urban spaces. In the Caribbean, we have the majority of our populations living in urban spaces that are very close to coastlines, so representing a lot of vulnerability to climate change. And thinking about the intersectionality between the vulnerability of climate change and the vulnerability that particularly women face in urban settings, with violence against women and gender-based violence taking place a lot. And so as we try to look at how those urban spaces are going to grow and change and become more resilient, how they can become resilient and inclusive and safe across a gendered landscape. And that involves making sure that women and girls are part of the conversations, part of the decision-making, to reinvent, to plan, to implement those spaces so that everyone can live a productive and safe and inclusive life in those urban spaces as we go through the effects of climate change, but also to make sure that we are empowering women and having gender equality in the recovery and resilience to those impacts of climate change. So that was just to give a bit of an idea of the various lenses and the sort of layers in which we're thinking about gender responsiveness in the climate change space. And I look forward to hearing what some of the other speakers bring up as well as part of this conversation, because we really, really also believe in a collaborative approach and working together with others in this space. So thank you so much, Danielle.
Nadia, thank you very much. And as you mentioned, this topic has different layers and different lenses that you have to look through it. So in order to do that, I would like to introduce you like Donna Edens. She's the program manager of the climate change of the European Union delegation. And Donna, I would like to start asking you how the European Union are prioritizing the gender equality in all the projects that it is implementing in the region.
Hi, Daniel, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Gender equality and women's empowerment is a very key topic and priority issue for the European Union. It is considered at the very highest level in the Treaty on the European Union, which is the protocol for how the EU nations interact and how they make decisions. It is enshrined in the global strategy for foreign policy and security. And outside of that, because it's enshrined in those very key documents for the European Union, it then is internalized in every single action that is supported by the European Union. So all of the external actions, all of development assistance, whether it be in climate change, circular economy, or any other aspect of development work that has done by the EU, is guided by the gender strategic policies and strategies that have been outlined. In our multi-annual indicative program, which is basically our roadmap for Latin America and Caribbean for 2021 to 2027, which is this current programming cycle, all of the actions that are undertaken are guided by the action plan for gender equality and women's empowerment, every single one. And in the planning and development of any program, the rules and regulations are quite stringent as it pertains to ensuring that gender equality and women's empowerment are adequately and meaningfully considered in the action. So it goes through a process of being reviewed by our directorate on gender, and to ensure that at least 85% of our programs have significant objectives that are geared towards gender equality and women's empowerment. So for every program, there's the thresholds are stringent in the design, in the rollout, and gender analyses are usually needed to support program design to ensure that it is not just what may tend to happen sometimes in disaggregation of data, but women are placed in the center of the actions, center of decision making, to ensure that their role is a critical role in any action that has rolled out, and that they benefit equally from any of the outcomes of the action. Specifically, the Gender Action Plan has thematic areas for engagement, which ensures that we harness the opportunities for green transition and digital transformation, and that we can clearly demonstrate that all the elements considered, ensure that gender equality and women's empowerment will be rolled out in how the actions are implemented. So at all levels, from the highest to project implementation, to how we deal with our partners, to how those are rolled out. And then in every single delegation, there's a gender focal point to ensure that when implementation happens, that they can follow the course of implementation and have a continuous monitoring strategy to ensure that what was articulated in the contract documents, in the project documents, is actually what will happen on the ground. And that has monitored continuously. Adjustments are made to ensure that this remains as a key element to all of the programs.
Thank you very much, Donna. So you mentioned an important, number, that 85% of your projects have to be considered or be gender related.
At minimum, at minimum, 85% of our projects need to have gender equality and women's empowerment as a key strategic objective, and they need to demonstrate how that will be done in the course of implementation. That may look differently from project to project, but over all the actions that we do for Latin America and the Caribbean, at least at minimum 85% must demonstrate that and have that as a key objective.
Sure, Donna. Yeah, that's really relevant. Also, that's why we also like to introduce Lauren Creary. She's the program director of the Jamaican Environment Trust. And, Lauren, we would like to ask you, how are the women in Jamaica raising awareness surrounding the climate change and improper waste management, and how does this promote the gender equality and women empowerment in the country?
All right. Hello. Good morning, everyone. So I'm from the Jamaica Environment Trust, and that is a nonprofit that was started in 1991. And it has, from its inception, been a female-led organization. And I think I'm in quite a privileged position to have these examples that have been constant throughout JET's leadership. So all CEOs have been female. Our current CEO, Teresa Rodriguez Moody, is leading JET, and I think it provides a great example for empowerment of women, great representation. But I think in the space in general, so the environmental protection space in general in Jamaica, you have some significant and strong examples of women who are supporting environmental protection in a very significant way. You have many initiatives that are led, conceptualized by women. Just to name a few there, well, JET as well is one, the Jamaica Climate Change Youth Council, the Climate Change Division was led by a woman for many years, Girls Care Jamaica, CCAM, Caribbean Coastal Area Management Foundation, Jamaica Conservation Development Trust. So these are all female-led organizations who are making a change in the space. And in particular, to focus on climate change, the Girls Care Initiative, they mentor young women and they have a specific focus on climate change and climate action. So they do this through mentorship, advocacy, and they focus on they focus on activities that are gender responsive, and they also provide training and information on climate advocacy. So this is just one example of how they're raising awareness about climate change. JET, for another example, through the Nadia of Jamaica campaign, which was conceptualized by a team of women in 2014 or 2015, and under a broader project, has been raising environmental awareness and awareness around solid waste management issues. So currently the program is actually supported by the Global Environment Facility Small Grants Program, which falls under UNDP. And we've been getting great support from the SGP office out here, the National Coordinator, Fardane and Hyacinth. They are both strong women who are providing guidance for us, as well as the other grantees under the Small Grants Program. But Nadia of Jamaica encourages people to take responsibility for their garbage, but we have many components. We work with communities directly to improve their waste management, and we also have a focus on plastics, which of course links to climate change. One thing we've noticed is that women play an important role as it was mentioned before, they're change makers and they're influential in the spaces that they operate in. So we find that a lot of women that are attending our workshops, that are attending our beach cleanups, that are calling, or a lot of people that are doing those activities are women, and they are trying to make a change. Just to mention one last program that JET has run for the past 2 or 3 decades, the Schools Environment Program. I think it's important to note how important teachers are in raising children, teaching our children, and the majority of teachers in Jamaica are women. So through our SEP program, we've been able to work directly with teachers to empower them. We do workshops with the teachers as well as students, so that the impact is spread more widely throughout the community. So those are just a few examples of how women are raising awareness and how JET has been a female-led organization, and women have been at the forefront of that fight for many, many years.
Lauren, thank you very much. So I think that at this moment is also important. So starting to understand what is, for example, the impact, the human impact of the Caribbean. And in one of these impacts is the impact that the fishing industry is doing, and not only the fishing industry, but also the fishing communities that are, working in the area. So in order to talk about this, I would like to introduce Fadila Lee. She's the Assistant Executive Director of the Gulf and the Caribbean Fisheries Institute. Fadila, can you please help us to understand more like the impacts, the environmental impacts of the fishing communities in the zone, in the area?
Thank you, Daniel. The impacts of fisheries in the Caribbean they vary from island to island, but what is a unified impact is that how many countries within the Caribbean are dependent on fisheries and fish as a source of food, as a source of income, in terms of, for many of them, it is their primary export. And the impact of fisheries can be directly on the species, in terms of there can be impacts via overfishing or very destructive practices in terms of things such as dynamite fishing or highly extractive procedures, or the impact can be on the methods that are used. So you can have the fishing methods that are applied, the traps, in terms of, especially when you consider things such as climate change, after Hurricane Maria and Irma, there was a lot of loss of fishing traps in Puerto Rico. And this can cause impact in terms of the traps being actual waste in the oceans and causing damage to substrates and coral reefs. But then also you have the incidence of the concept known as ghost gear, or abandoned, lost, and discarded fishing gear, where fishing gear that has been lost into the ocean continues to fish and catch commercially important species or environmentally important species. And they continue to fish, therefore reducing the number and the species available to communities to use. There are also impacts of fishing and fisheries in terms of pollution. When you have aspects such as fish farming or aquaculture, you can have conversion of land to accommodate these fishing practices, and that could then have lead-on impacts on neighboring communities. And it's all a real cycle where the inputs and the outputs can affect each other. And there are several studies on nutrient pollution, which can then have lead-on impacts on eutrophication. And therefore, even though the cause of the problem would have been fisheries, it goes around full circle to then affect fisheries in general because of the health of the ecosystem that there is. And the Gulf and Caribbean Fisheries Institute, as you spoke about the role of gender, the Gulf and Caribbean Fisheries Institute has been working with several partners to address issues related to gender, along with the University of the West Indies in Cave Hill. Their gender and fisheries team has been doing a lot of work in the Caribbean to address the important role that women play. And GCFI in general, we have a concept known as the Gladden Memorial Award, which recognizes the role that fishers play in the region, and recognizing that these fishers are the ones that are out in the ocean and can really see the impact of their practices. And so we believe in giving them a voice. And so far, we have awarded 24 Gladden Memorial Awards, of which 3 have been women. Our most recent awardee has been a woman from Florida. So that's just a quick introduction to some of the impacts of fisheries, Daniel.
Fadila, thank you very much. Those were really, really relevant insights in order to understand, the whole situation. And I would like to go back to Lauren. Lauren, talking about these environmental impacts, what are those impacts that you are seeing that are happening, in the area of influence of in Jamaica, because you work with tourism there also. So all of this human activity has an impact over, your coastal line and all the, the ocean and the water activity there. So can you give us some insights of what are your views over this?
Sure. So if we're going to focus on the tourism industry firstly, and then I want to touch on solid waste and how it impacts fisheries as well, as part of the impact it has on the environment. But within the tourism industry, the type of tourism that we focus on, which is very similar to other Caribbean islands, is the sun, sea, and sand model. So that requires, or that includes having large tourism developments right on the coastline that are often foreign owned and all-inclusive in the model that they practice. However, the issue with this is that there are mangrove forests that are destroyed to facilitate, oftentimes mangroves that are destroyed to facilitate this type of development, and that can have detrimental impacts on the environment, biodiversity. We know that mangroves are extremely important and should be protected because of the benefits that they provide, especially against the impacts of climate change. And as a small island developing state, we are set to bear the brunt and the most devastating impacts of climate change, and we are affected disproportionately to what we contribute to the issue. So the model of tourism that we're practicing is not congruent with the preparations that we need to be making against climate change. But we've seen that this is a practice that is continued because there is the constant struggle between ensuring that the economy is safeguarded as well as safeguarding the protection of the environment. And that is definitely something that we battle with every day in Jamaica. But to move on to the impacts of solid waste, that is a far-reaching issue. It's not localized to any one tourist area or any one area in Jamaica. It's very widespread and has to be tackled from many different angles. So we just recently wrapped up a project on Go Scare, or ALDFG, as was mentioned before, and we are doing some sensitization around that issue. Not many people are aware, but I think people are becoming more aware of the impacts that plastics in particular have on the marine environment, terrestrial environment. And that is one of the focal areas that we have under this Another Tip Jamaica campaign that feeds into the plastic innovation focal point for the small grants project that we have. But solid waste management has been a big issue for decades. There has been the implementation of the plastic ban, which is a step in the right direction, and it is set to be expanded. So initially it included styrofoam, plastic straws, and certain single-use plastic bags, and it is set to be expanded to include micro beads from cosmetic products, as well as some other plastic food containers that have come in to replace the plastic.
Okay, Lauren, thank you very much for those insights. Now I would like to go back to Nadia. Nadia, women are vital agents of change, how they can help the community moving towards a more efficient waste management and while they're contributing to tackling climate change.
Yeah, no, I mean, the interventions from Fadila and Lauren are great examples already of women-led organizations, networks actually doing things. To be honest, we really need to find ways to learn more from a lot of those actions. And that's one of the things that we do. We try to do a lot of assessments and the data collection to be able to capture the data, the lessons, the stories around that, so that that can be shared across the Caribbean and elsewhere so that others can learn from that. So we don't currently do a lot in solid waste management. So I think, these kind of seminars are great for already linking people together. So we have to talk to Lauren and to look further into that. But in the general arena, back to your question, Danielle, we find that we first of all need to have the enabling environment set up in a way that women are brought to the table so that they can be those change agents, so that they can have a voice, so that they can be part of the discussions. As I was mentioning in the model we were looking at in the urban spaces, so for resilient, inclusive, secure and smart cities, where good planning involves the voices of women and girls in figuring out how to grow our cities to make them and their inhabitants more resilient. And so there you would see important voices around solid waste management, for example, and bringing in experiences. So if we're looking at an urban setting, we work a lot with, say, markets within some of those urban settings. Majority of the market vendors will be women, and making sure that their needs and their conditions and the things that can help them to be productive and safe inhabitants and within that city and productive members of that city are taken into account. Because you may have an example where certain laws or policies or frameworks are put in place even for something like solid waste management, and Lauren will be able to talk more to this, that hasn't taken into account the needs or the particular conditions that women face, and what they can bring as solutions, what the effects are. So it's about making sure that they're part of those conversations, those decision-making moments, to be able to see the solutions be more gender responsive. And following on from that, then just making sure that as we see projects rolling out, that there's the gender responsive element to it. So we're collecting data, and there's that training of those who are involved to understand how to make those things gender responsive. So we are in major listening and learning mode constantly, so that that evidence can be brought into the spaces where decisions are made, so that we see things moving forward in a much more gender responsive way. Thanks.
Thank you, Nadia. Donna, now I would like to go with you. You know, Nadia mentioned that it's quite relevant to bring women to the table. Talking about the European Union Waste Program, what are you doing towards gender equality and empower women in all these waste programs that you're implementing?
So there are a number of ways, and the program, for those of you who are not familiar with it, is a region-wide program that we are collaborating with 3 agencies, UNEP being one of them, the German Development Agency, GIZ, and the French Development Agency, AFD, and AFD is collaborating with the OECS Commission on this. So the main thrust of the regional program is to support policy development and strengthening at the regional level, which is mainly what UNEP would be doing. And then GIZ and AFD are supporting the implementation of pilot actions at the national level, GIZ focusing primarily on the Dominican Republic, and AFD focusing on some of the OECS countries. And all of this is supposed to come together to support investments in the long term. The pilot demonstration is supposed to be proof of concept in a lot of cases in order to attract investment. So at each phase of the regional program, gender equality and women's empowerment considered through gender analysis. So there's a gender analysis being done for the policy level intervention for UNEP, which will inform how policies are strengthened or gaps are filled in the policy dimension throughout the Caribbean countries, and each country be supported in that way to strengthen their own institutional capacity and policy frameworks to ensure that the policies provide for or consider adequately gender equality and women's empowerment. For the pilot studies, let's use the example of the AFD project and OECS. They're starting out right from the gates with a gender analysis. So all of the pilot actions that will be undertaken in solution and 2 other OECS countries that are to be determined will be guided by the outcome of that gender analysis to ensure that it addresses the gaps, to ensure it doesn't exacerbate existing disparities, and to ensure that women in particular come to the table, to ensure that these structures are formulated in a way for them to have a voice at the table and to be a meaningful part of the decision-making process. And then this will go to supporting how we can roll out economic opportunities for women in the waste management sector. We have a lot more women now than before in the sector, but there's still a good disparity between men and women, and the decision-making process could do with some more women, in my opinion. So this entire regional project is to do just that. Not only that, but every single element of it, from the pilot studies to the policy development to the investment strategy and the rolling out of any investments, will take that into consideration, and that will be at its core.
That's great, Donna. Thank you very much. And yeah, as you mentioned, this is like it's it's a process that is progressing and it needs more. Also, Fadila, I would like to go with you and talking about a little bit also about circular economy aspects. How is your institute working on educating and raising awareness about these sort of issues, particularly on how women might be involved in all these processes?
So one of the projects we've been working on recently, with funding from Fisheries and Oceans Canada, we have been working on Ghost Scare a lot. And one of the issues that we found is that within the region, because of the difficulty with, or the difficulties of inter-island trade, if we were to develop a Caribbean-wide recycling plant for fishing gear, the cost of moving from island to island would be very difficult. And with the Global Ghost Gear Initiative, we have done some feasibility studies looking at the potential for recycling and using the waste that is generated, because we are doing education and getting fishers aware of the issue of ghost gear or ALDFG, but then the issue arises in terms of what can be done once you do remove them. And so we found that recycling isn't feasible for the region. However, there are opportunities for local reuse of products. So we hosted a workshop early in March using case studies from around the globe and how discarded fishing gear can be used as a resource for other industries. So you can have instances where fishing line and fishing nets can be made into art, or even into lower products such as dog collars or leashes. And then this ties in with the tourism industry in terms of having, when tourists visit these countries, it is a product that they can not only have from the country, but also their money is helping to support a green product. And the other thing that happens is that this is sort of making or giving opportunities to economies where women are very dominant in. So you can have within the fishing industry, it is a very much male, the act of fishing is a very much male dominant industry. However, in the processing and marketing aspects of the fish value chain, that's where the women come in. Also, you have the handicraft aspects tend to be dominated by women. So it is an opportunity to involve women in terms of making a new form of income. And it has been done in other countries, in Palau, in Vanuatu, in the Pacific, where they are using the waste, essentially, that is created through fishing into a resource that not only helps to mitigate those impacts, but also starts as a conversation piece in terms of, whilst walking your dog, this dog collar or this dog leash was made from recycled fishing gear. So that's one of the aspects that we've been doing. And then we've also been doing a fisher-led ALDFG awareness campaign. So we recognize that education is important, because since there's less potential for the end product, we want to prevent it from happening in the first place. So preventing ghost gear from happening is probably the priority. And the best way to do that is through education and making fishers aware of the impacts of ghost gear on the environment, as well as their potential livelihoods. And we've also found that the best way to complete this education is this sort of peer-to-peer interaction. So we developed communication products targeted towards fishers, and we employed fishers to go about and conduct this education program, because we use our Gladden Memorial Award winners who have that level of respect within their communities, and then also that leads to some sort of very candid conversations that can happen from fisher to fisher, as compared to if a scientist or a foreigner were to go in. And this year, we have actually used a woman fisher to pioneer our work in St. Lucia. So currently, this fisher is going out and conducting education, visiting communities, visiting schools, and talking to other fishers about the issue of ghost gear, and then also what you can do to help prevent it. So thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Fadila. You are raising a really important topic here, that is education, and you mentioned what you're doing also in St. Lucia. Lauren, I would like to go with you. There is something that you're working towards education or awareness of these sort of things in Jamaica.
Yeah, so we've also been working with fishers on the same issue of ALDFG and ghost scare. And I like the idea of having fishers lead the sensitization, because we do have a group of fishers. It actually is all male, but I do acknowledge that along the value chain, that women play a very important role. But at the moment, these fishers are showing up for the meeting, spreading the message, but that's a great idea to have them lead within their communities as well. The public education, so JET focuses on advocacy and public education, and our main campaign at the moment is the Nudity of Jamaica campaign, which works with communities. We do social media and so on. But we do see a lot of women that are involved, and we work with the Rosetown Foundation, and this is a female-led organization as well. And they have done work to increase sensitization of solid waste issues in that community. And the environmental wardens that have been trained are all women. About 80% or 90% of the people that have come to our workshops are also women. So we can see where their involvement is, impactful and making changes within their community.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lauren. So also would like to go with Donna. Donna, do you have any insights from your perspective from the European Union towards education and awareness readiness in the region?
From our end, most programs have a capacity building component included into it, and a public awareness component. I must admit that we're not always the strongest as it comes to public awareness and communication. Efforts are being made to strengthen those areas so that the results of what we do are more clear. A lot of that is done through the implementing partners that actually do implement the actions on the ground. But I can say that in all aspects of capacity building, women and vulnerable groups are considered first. How they can be included, how it best suits them, how it's framed, bears that in mind. Under the current solid waste initiative, there are a number of capacity building elements that will be rolled out to do with policy, to do with recycling. In the DR, there are a few efforts, the pilot initiatives in a couple of communities in the Dominican Republic support capacity building in how recycling goes, what that looks like, and involving women in the upcycling of recyclables, how those could be used in different ways and sold in a commercial way. So yes, just to say that all of our programs have to have and usually have a very strong capacity building element integrated into them.
Donna, thank you very much. Nadia, I would like to go with you. What are you doing from the UN Women in order to achieve, to raise awareness and work towards education also?
Okay, I would say that we sort of have three main areas that we focus on. We create a lot of knowledge products. So as I'd mentioned before, in a lot of our gender responsive climate change and resilience work, we're doing a lot of assessments, a lot of studies to really create that evidence base. And these become knowledge products that are available through our website. They get launched at events with a variety of government and development partners to be able to be used in those processes. So these knowledge products are really key, and they help inform next programs. They help inform policy setting or other activities. So we rely a lot on these knowledge products. We also have a lot of training activities with a variety of partners. So we may do gender responsive training with SEDIMA or with our local communities in the 9 Caribbean countries that we're focusing on currently for one of the climate change projects. And so through those trainings is bringing in the evidence from the knowledge, from the assessments that are published in these knowledge products, but transformed into ways that can create awareness depending on who the audience is. So a lot of training modules. And then advocacy. Thanks for inviting us to be part of a webinar like this, because this is one of the great ways in which we get these kind of messages out. And so myself and numerous colleagues speak at events and go to events that we're invited at. So you may be invited to an OACS meeting or a parliamentary session or a visit of schools to our office. And so through speaking events, we have a lot of opportunities to do advocacy around this area. So I would say those are the three main areas. And yeah, if there's other ideas of how to get the awareness out there better, as Donna said, we're also continuously looking to strengthen that, because the message has to get out there, the evidence has to get out there for others to be able to adopt this and to collaborate with us on this journey. Thanks, Danielle.
Thank you, Nadia, and also would like to thank Lauren, Fadila, and Donna for being here. We reached the end of the webinar, but yeah, as you mentioned, Nadia, it is important to keep doing this sort of activities in order to raise awareness. So this is the first that we do, but not the last. And yeah, thank you for coming here, for explaining to us and to the people who is participating in the webinar. The audience and the people who is listening. Thank you very much for participating. Be sure that we're going to bring more spaces like this in the future. Thank you very much for your participation.